This conference will now be recorded.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December meeting of the Joint Committee. This is Brian Garcia. I am going to chair the meeting until we get to the third agenda item, or following the third agenda item. So let me call the meeting to order. Are there any public comments? All right, hearing no comments, let's go to agenda item 3. So let me provide some context on agenda item 3. So all of you might recall, since our last meeting, we had Mike Lee leave us, the chief of the Bureau of Energy Technology and Policy. In his stead, Deputy Commissioner Hackett is coming in to represent DEEP on the Joint Committee. Thank you, Commissioner. As you all are aware, per the bylaws, there's an ex officio seat held for DEEP. There may be instances where, just given the commissioner's really busy schedule, where someone on her team may be designated to serve in her capacity on the Joint Committee, but we're fortunate to have Vicki with us here today. So a couple things as well, with the retirement of Eric Brown. We being the Connecticut Green Bank and the Energy Efficiency Board, lost a board member. We also lost the chair of the Joint Committee. And with Mike Lee going back to Maryland, we have a gap there also between both of our boards. And with respect to the Joint Committee, we lose our vice chair. So I've had conversations with Lonnie Reed, the chair of the Connecticut Green Bank, who's on the line, and Neil Biop, the chair of the Energy Efficiency Board, who were both comfortable and confident in the leadership of Brenda Watson being potentially nominated to serve in the role of chair of the Joint Committee. If that were to happen, that would be great, because again, we'd have another person who sits on both boards who can really relay things across. So wanted to see if anyone wanted to nominate Brenda Watson to serve as chair of the Joint Committee per the bylaw process of the Joint Committee, section 2.3 and 2.4. Is there any?
This is Lonnie. I nominated Brenda.
And this is John. I would second that nomination.
Great. Any questions, comments from members of the Joint Committee?
I think it's a terrific choice. This is John Harity.
Yes, this is Vicki Hackett. I also agree. A fantastic choice to sort of bridge these two entities, and really looking forward to Brenda's tenure.
Excellent. Well, I guess we should ask Brenda before we finalize the motion of would you be willing to serve in that capacity?
Well, I'm honestly and truly honored in everyone's confidence in me, and now this means I have to fully engage in all of these meetings and no more multitasking. So thank you very much. I'll do my best.
Excellent. So we have a first and a second on the nomination per resolution 1. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Sorry, Brian, there was an aye for me. For some reason I'm having trouble with my mouse today getting to my mic. So aye for Vicki.
Awesome. Great. And abstentions? Okay, great. Chair Watson, would you like to continue with resolution 2, or would you like me to do this and then hand it over to you in the next agenda item?
I am ready to take over. Thank you very much, Brian, for all of your support and for the folks at the Green Bank. So next item on the agenda is to elect Vicki Hackett as I'm sorry, we already did that. Where am I, Brian? Am I at number 4?
You're right. Yep, you're right.
Oh, okay, I'm right. Okay. Yes, I'd like a nomination on the floor to nominate Deputy Commissioner Vicki Hackett to serve as Vice Chair in the Joint Committee, according to
This
the
is
bylaws.
Lonnie. I nominate Deputy Commissioner Vicki Hackett to serve as Vice Chair.
And I'd be happy to second that nomination, John Harity.
Great. Do we have any yays or nays here? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any discussion? All right, the ayes have it.
Thanks,
Just,
folks.
I guess, just under discussion, I'd just say that this represents a formidable team to lead the joint board. So I expect great things.
Okay.
This is Lonnie. I totally agree. I think we have just an exceptional team and no pressure.
Right. And I'm gonna get this right. I have my daughter's version of Robert's Rules of Order at home, so I'm gonna read that tonight. Well, thank you everyone for your votes. So we're gonna move on to item number 5 here on the agenda. Actually, number 4, to review and approve the minutes of the June 16th meeting. So what we need today is, so we actually provided you all with the meeting minutes from June 16th. Would anyone like to move resolution number 3 to approve the minutes?
This is John Harity. I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
This is Lonnie. I second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Abstentions? Okay, hearing none, we are going to go ahead and approve the June 16th, 21 meeting minutes. Moving right along here to the next item on the agenda. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brian now.
Excellent. So this is our regular meeting schedule proposed for next year. As some of you might recall, working with our EDC colleagues and the EEB consultants, we spent some time several years ago kind of mapping our annual and every 3-year planning processes and kind of important things that were happening over the course of a year to develop a standardized meeting date schedule. So these are the dates matched up to 2021. So for example, our next meeting in March, we will focus in on starting to look at the Green Bank's next fiscal year comprehensive plan and getting input into what I think, Glenn, would be year 1, forgive me, or year 2 of the CLNM 3-year plan. So we've plotted all of these dates. So that's the structure and the proposal for the regular meeting schedule for 2022.
Brian, quick question for you. Actually, before I ask the question, if we can just remember to mute our lines if we're not speaking. But my question is, are we ever going to consider in-person meetings in 2022? I know that numbers are spiking with COVID, but just wanted to ask what your thoughts were on that.
Great question. I would say yes, I hope so. I think COVID is really tripping us all up in very different ways. I think we all see tremendous value in being together in person, but we're balancing that against the public health risks. So I would like to say yes, for those who are comfortable being in person at such a time when it makes sense. You know, it feels like we're in a funky spot right now, but I think we should aspire to have meetings in person to the extent people are comfortable doing it, given you know, where we are in the battle against COVID. So it's a yes, but.
Yep, gotcha. All right, so based on the schedule that Brian just shared with us, can I get a motion to move resolution number 4, approving the regular meeting schedule of 2022?
So moved.
Lonnie, I second.
Great. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any abstentions? All right, hearing none. Well, there's a question and actually a comment in the chat noting that June 22nd conflicts with the CTAC meeting, which may be an issue for Vicky in particular. But I think we can go ahead and move the motion.
Yes, we should be able to accommodate that.
Great. Thanks for flagging that for us, Richard. All right, so moving right along now, you all may recall at the last joint committee meeting that BW Research Partnership Team presented results of their analysis. We have spent the last couple of months summarizing those findings into the report. So I'll go ahead and turn that over to Brian to provide the summary.
Excellent. Yeah, so at our last joint committee meeting, Sarah presented the data on where we were for the job study. You all might recall, like last year, we had it in, and it was in a report, almost like an academic report, very long, extensive, and we had decided that it was important that the information be communicated more effectively than a kind of academic report on a bookshelf. So in our 2020 report, we took that information and data and synthesized it into infographics, you know, along with text and a narrative that we followed this year. So after the presentation in the last joint committee meeting, working with our colleagues at the utilities, our colleagues at DEEP, and our designer, we took all of that. Rudy Stirk on our team did a great job coordinating and pulling all this together to assemble it into what you see in your materials. So it's different in the sense of its presentation, in terms of its content. It's pulling from the overarching information and report that BW Research pulled together. We did work with the DEEP team over the last month to 2 months to reflect the important work that was done to support the contractor community as it was navigating through COVID. So balancing the risks of ensuring safety and all the things that were done subsequently to help the industry kind of come out and restore itself. And you know, if you haven't taken a look at the report, take a look at it. It's really interesting in terms of seeing how Connecticut's numbers compared against our neighbors, the country, and the broader Connecticut economy. Essentially, our clean energy industry was more resilient than all the others. So a really interesting data piece if you didn't see it or didn't catch it. I guess the only thing I would recommend that the Joint Committee consider is that in the last report, we had Eric Brown as chair of the committee in the introductory section. In this report, because we didn't have a chair at the time, we now have a chair. I would recommend that consideration be given for Brenda Watson to be the face of the report in the introductory section, and I can work with Rudy on our team to make all of those edits. That would be one suggestion I would have. And then just in terms of this is based on what we did last time in terms of releasing the report, so we're really following the same playbook. There may be other ideas or things that you want us to do. Let us know that. We will build that into the plan. But the first would be to develop a press release, pulling all the pieces together, thinking about the timing of that release. You all, I think, will have a good sense of that. We've got a short legislative session. Do we want to play this before session starts, during session, all those sorts of things. We will work with BW Research to do a webinar on the findings within the report. And then obviously this has been a great area for us and the utilities to work collaboratively together to then do a 2022 report. So we will, I would propose that we continue that activity. The report this year, you might recall, we had a $50,000 budget, 25,000 of which would be for data collection, and then 25,000 would be for some optional analyses. The BW team was able to secure the federal funding, which had stopped during President Trump, has now continued. So we will not have to pay $25,000 for data collection because that the federal government will now fund that. We do have 25,000 of other things. Candidly, we just haven't had time to dig into how we might use those additional resources. We've got some ideas. I just think bandwidth, everyone's kind of we're struggling to pull that together. So open to thinking about how we might do that for the next report. But continuing this with the utilities would be great. So those are the thoughts on the plan. Modify, include, Brenda, and then these are proposed possible next steps for how we would release it. But want to get your guidance in terms of what you think.
Thank you, Brian, for that. I have to admit I'm a little embarrassed to take credit for all of the work that my predecessor has done. So I feel a little torn about that piece, adding my photo in the report. I struggle with that. I wouldn't want to take credit away from Eric at all. So that's my feedback on that piece. And the other question that I have about the webinars, are you looking at perhaps joining other committees across the state to present on these, or are you looking at inviting folks to where you would present it in one large format? So what I mean by that is, I actually cited some of the findings of this study at a Bridgeport Regional Business Committee meeting last week, which they were really quite intrigued, and I thought it would be great if we could actually present at their meeting versus inviting folks like that to a webinar. So just wanted to get your sense of what you're thinking in terms of bringing this report to the masses.
So that's
if I can add something to that, Brian, just giving you all sort of a little teaser heads up, we anticipate that we'll be releasing, the governor will be releasing an executive order tomorrow, and this is not, this hasn't gone completely public yet, but and that executive order may have some overlap, that we may want to consider as we look at how to roll this report out. So I think I can say that much for now. And I think you'll all be excited when you see the executive order tomorrow.
This is Lonnie. I just want to totally bless what Brenda has said as well. As you'll recall, Brian, when we did our event at Yale, and we expanded the presentations to really include a lot of neighborhoods that hadn't been asked to these events before, and they kept saying, when are you coming to our neighborhood?
Yep.
And I think that's what we need to do. We need to take it on our act on the road, quite frankly, and sell it and hear and really listen to people and hear. And I think that would really help make things happen faster, but it also it's great optics. You know, it shows that we're really serious about delivering.
Yep. And what it does is it kind of just forces people to listen to it because it's their meeting versus being invited to someone else's webinar. I think it's more impactful to take this show on a road.
Perfect. So what I'm hearing on that context, EDC partners too, is maybe we can develop a few slides from the report that have notes so that we're all comfortable plugging ourselves in to the meetings with others and reflecting the importance of the report. I think this is great because last time what we did was one big presentation on the report, which is fine, but we miss opportunities to then talk about the programs, you know, that are going on. You know, so the report is about jobs, great, but let's get action. And so I think in terms of the big presentation, we'll do the report and work with the EDCs to then talk about the other things, the tariff, the programs, the EE program, the CLNM programs, yada yada, to build that in, and also work with stakeholders in the community to plug ourselves in if they want us to present. So Brenda, you and I can kind of figure out that channel and begin that path.
Agree.
On the timing, maybe Commissioner, after today, we could lean on you, you know, to think ahead, you know, on the press release and the release of this, given that, and you can give us guidance on that.
I'm sorry, Brian, do you mean with respect to the executive order, or I mean, I think that, what's the timing for it to be finished? Ready to go. Do you think it's ready to go?
Yeah, so the report is done, barring the introductory section. I got you there, Brenda. I think we can figure out how the credit will flow. So barring a press release, you know, putting that together, having the webinar ready, you know, that's going to take us probably mid to late January to get that ready.
Yeah, I think that timing wise, we just want to make sure it goes out, you know, before the session, right?
Okay, there we go. Before session.
Yeah, and obviously Deep will help with any, you know, press efforts, and I do think that there will be, you know, sort of a role to play. First of all, I agree with what Brenda and Lonnie said about sort of taking this on the road instead of expecting people to come to us. And I think that some of what you'll see in the executive order also gives us a sort of a venue to do some of that. So, you know, I think we should have more conversation about what that looks like. You know, after, I wish that, you know, I could say more today, but you know, after that goes out.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll coordinate on the messaging after that goes out, but before session, we will work on the press release and the dates and the events. Okay, I've got a couple of tasks from here. Any other?
This is Lonnie again. I just want to also, before I forget, totally again say that I thought Brenda made a very good point about not wanting to step on Eric and the work he's done, but why can't we have two pictures and show our transition? Because that's representation from two powerful groups in this state, and it also shows, you know, how combining we are in terms of pulling together around some really key goals. So
Brilliant.
It's a great idea.
Brilliant. Love it. I'll confirm that with Eric, but I love it.
Brian, this is Glenn Reed. Also want to point out, and the company should correct me if I'm wrong, that there will be references to the report in the EEB's annual legislative report, which is filed on or about March 1st. So this will be leveraged in other places too.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you, Glenn. Okay, I think we've got sufficient guidance here on where we're at, and yeah, lots of tasks to get done in January. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for all those who weighed in. All right, moving on to item number 7, plan coordination. I believe we have Steve Bruno, Brian, Joe, Kobilek, and Glenn Reed up next for that.
Cool. I'm going to take the stab on the Green Bank side, and I think Glenn on the CL&M side, you've got it.
Correct.
So in terms of the Green Bank, so this is year-end, December meeting. In January, our Budget and Operations and Compensation Committee meets to review the half-year progress to targets in budget. A recommendation from that committee is then issued to our board at the first meeting of the year at the end of January. So we're currently in that process now of having conversations with the staff on where we are. But in general, at a high level, this is a transition year for the Green Bank. We are onboarding several new board members and getting all of our committees lined up. I think at our last board meeting, we had 4 new members of the board that we introduced. So lots of change. It's great. So that involves transition, requires providing enough information to those board members so they feel comfortable and confident that they can contribute meaningfully in the discussion, dialogue, and decisions. So we're going through that, as it sounds like the EEB is as well. We are wrapping up the residential solar investment program. In fact, I think we're 1.5 megawatts away. We'll have that 1.5 megawatts done by the end of January of next year. So we are transitioning the 350 megawatts of completed projects that we have to do per the statute to make sure that they are operating through 15 years or more, upon which we are able to cost recover the incentives and the administrative costs that we've borne the last decade. We are working on the inclusion of the battery storage incentive program within the comprehensive plan. We've had that within our comprehensive plan the last couple of years. It's great. We're going to be hearing from Director Ryer in a second. So we are going to be building the new energy storage solutions program into the comprehensive plan. That program will be co-administered by the EDCs and the Green Bank, so that will go in. Any updates will go in. And then, as you all know, we are in the process of developing what we're doing on environmental infrastructure, given Public Act 21-115, which expands our scope beyond clean energy to include environmental infrastructure. So we are having conversations with stakeholders out in Connecticut. We are wrapping up land conservation and parks and recreation and heading into agriculture and then water and so forth. So that's going to be a process that will take us into the spring. Hopefully we will be able to have a conversation with our board and bring forth recommendations for the FY23 comprehensive plan. Environmental justice, Justice 40, equity has been built into our plan. We are continuing Green Liberty bonds. In fact, we will chat. I saw Bert on. Why don't we, Bert, if we can, chat in the link to the Green Liberty notes that were just issued today. What I can say on that is we are providing an opportunity for everyday citizens to buy bonds. The proceeds of those bonds go towards supporting the program that we jointly administer, or the Small Business Energy Advantage. So this is an opportunity for citizens to support energy efficiency for small businesses. And today, those bonds just got released. So Bert, if you can chat through the link, that would be great. And then, lots of federal things happening. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act, potentially Build Back Better. I'm hearing chatter. Maybe that will go next week. Who knows? Before Christmas, no one knows. But lots of good and interesting things in there that people are sifting through and wrestling with and getting their arms around in terms of how we can all use those resources to drive more deployment to help us achieve our policy objectives. So just a high level of where we are in our mid-year process on our comprehensive plan. Happy to take questions. All right. Okay, so that's it on the Green Bank side.
Great. So Glenn, you're going to review the CNLM plan?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Right.
You've got the
So,
floor.
thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Thank you. So the board filed on November 1st its 3-year plan for 2022 to 2024. Listed here are the 3 plan priorities for the full 3-year plan period, not just for 2024. Sorry about the title snafu there. Previously, we had been working under 7 plan priorities. Those had been, I'll say, both collapsed and expanded, particularly on the equity and energy affordability issue in terms of expansion, as well as a clearer and more focused attempt to address issues of decarbonization explicitly. It was certainly part of the existing current 3-year plan, but it's brought forward more substantively in this current upcoming 3-year plan. Want to go to the next slide, please? Right. There was significant stakeholder input. In the past, both during the 3-year plan process and during our annual plan updates, just as a reminder, we go through a 3-year plan cycle, but for years 2 and 3, we revisit the plan. And while we don't necessarily do a complete rewrite, we do revisit all significant components of the plan to ensure that it's fully reflective of what's proposed for implementation for the upcoming plan year. So we go through a plan update in years 2 and 3 of the plan. So compared to past years, both from a plan update cycle and for a 3-year plan cycle, we received very significant, very substantive comments, both at the board's public input sessions, and then I'll note after the plan was filed, DEEP held 2 days and an evening of technical hearings to encourage stakeholder input. A little difficult in a single slide and given the time available to fully capture the breadth and depth of the comments that were presented, but I do attempt to summarize them here. I'll just step through them quickly, and if there are any questions, people can speak to them, ask about them after my discussion. Clearly, support for electrification and for heat pumps was a front and center comment from a number of stakeholders. That suggestion recommendation went pretty much hand in hand with a request to see support for all fossil fuel fired equipment through the efficiency programs. The next 2 comments were primarily public comments during the board's public input session, less so during the technical hearings, and had to do with the actual plan development process itself. You know, there were questions about accessibility and transparency of the plan development process, and also a request to ensure that goals that were developed and metrics that were developed to measure success towards the objectives of the plan were clear and quantifiable. In addition, the 2 last areas were the issue of workforce development, particularly coming off of the pandemic, or segueing from the existing pandemic, was front and center for a number of parties, as well as, not surprisingly, the need to continue our efforts to reach underserved and energy burdened customers. Next slide, please. All right. This is the summary of the plan review process from DEEP's perspective. The green items have all been completed, starting with the filing of the plan on the 1st. There were the technical hearings, as I mentioned previously. DEEP also sent out a couple of requests for information, RFIs, to the utilities. The utilities have responded to both sets. And in blue are the upcoming steps that DEEP will be taking. Obviously, of greatest interest to the board and to the companies is the actual determination, which we would expect would also contain a number of conditions of approval. Next slide, please. Some high-level takeaways from the 3-year plan. Over $700 million ratepayer investment in energy efficiency, and this is the ratepayer investment. This does not include any additional investment from participating customers. There's a return of over $2.50 for every dollar invested by ratepayers in terms of benefits that are returned. We have a quantification of the energy savings for both lifetime electricity, natural gas, oil, and propane. And also I want to highlight that there's almost 400 megawatts of demand reduction, and this is a combination of both passive demand, that demand that's associated with our energy efficiency activities, and active demand, which constitute our demand response efforts. And in particular, if you look at the 3-year plan, there's a fairly significant growth in active demand savings over the plan's 3 years. Next slide, please. Some savings numbers, but I'll also note that we have budgets in the left-hand column. The gas budgets are relatively constant over the 3 years at about $55 million. However, the electric budgets do decline, and the primary reason for that is that the forward capacity market payments decline from 2001 from our current year through 2024 by more than 50%. So that reflects the very, very large majority of the change, the decline in budgets over time. And then you can see the annual savings again by fuel for all the fuels that are addressed by the programs. I will note also in passing that there will probably be, or there will be, an increased focused on delivered fuel savings in the C&I sector in this 3-year plan period, apart from clarification and direction provided by DEEP in a prior condition of approval. Next slide, please. And just for us to continue to think about continued areas for coordination between the Green Bank and the EDCs and the board in terms of the CLM plan. Noting here one of the specific activities or actions under DEEP's E3 proceeding having to do with working with the Green Bank for HES and HESIE, the 2 in-home programs, to address health and safety barriers and continue to put forward additional opportunities for coordination on the integration of renewables and the efficiency programs, particularly in areas such as new construction, as the companies increasingly focus on all electric offers, and further the pairing of heat pumps, PV, and storage is a natural, albeit somewhat expensive pairing, but it is something that we probably should all be investigating. And then finally, while not having been discussed previously, is there a need or opportunity for us to participate in a joint evaluation of our respective financing activities? And that's what I have. Any questions, or do the companies also want to add anything further to this?
Glenn, my quick question. In one of your earlier slides, you noted the top 6 pieces that were important to folks. Are those common themes from the previous plan, or are we seeing a change in what folks are wanting us to prioritize?
I would say, there has been an evolution in what we've been hearing. Certainly we've heard about electrification heat pumps, but never quite with the vigor and underlying concern on the part of multiple stakeholders, many of them environmental groups, regarding electrification heat pumps and fossil fuel equipment. They go all hand in hand. A smaller number were addressing the plan process. Workforce development has been something of a reoccurring theme, but again, I think coming off of at least the COVID peak, it's been highlighted, and certainly similarly coming off of the COVID peak, and all the associated discussions about equity or lack thereof, to the last point, you know, while low-income programs and underserved markets have, always been part of some of the comments, again, this was, much more substantive in the past. So while maybe nothing entirely new, just the underlying concern put forward, I think was, I'll say, redoubled.
Thank you.
Hi, this is John Harity. I had a question. And maybe I'm wrong. I thought that Connecticut had a program for assisting people who needed new boilers or for heating their homes because of the expense of that. And I'm just wondering if someone has like an ancient furnace, which many people do, and going forward, according to the plan, they could not receive any assistance for replacing that fossil fuel equipment, but the heating pump option is much more expensive. So does that leave kind of some people in the lurch, or how does that work?
So John, I'll speak to this, and maybe the companies will also want to speak to it. So I'll note that, those first two bullets were stakeholder input. They were not necessarily fully reflected in the 3-year plan. So while yes, we support heat pumps, we are still working through I'll say the evolution for heat pumps as a fuel switching measure. We do have an active residential pilot focusing on displacing delivered fuels with heat pumps, but we haven't fully worked through, a broader, fuel switching heat pump offer. We continue to offer incentives for efficient gas-fired equipment, be it low income or otherwise. And I'll note in the low income programs, there's also the ability in some cases to leverage federal funding, and I can let others speak more intelligently to that. The companies have not for some time offered or have used ratepayer funds for delivered fuel heating equipment, but for gas heating equipment, we continue to promote efficient equipment. There is a commitment in the plan for the companies to assess whether homeowners that already have condensing equipment in the house that is at or near failure, should the companies be supporting the use of ratepayer funds to continue to put in efficient condensing equipment when there already had been condensing equipment. But that's getting into some of the weeds and the details. So we're continuing to support at least efficient gas equipment replacements in the 3-year plan currently.
And the only thing, this is Ron Ruggio from Eversource. The only thing I would add to that, Glenn, it's gas heating equipment. We don't have any residential gas appliance rebates at this time.
Okay, and that's heats both space heating and hot water.
That is correct.
And Glenn, Steve Bruno, just a couple points on the original question was a financing. So there is the Smarty loan programs that are available to support heating equipment. And also there's I think what John was referring to is the Energize heat loan as well. Although the funds don't come through energy efficiency, we manage those through energy efficiency program, but those are for replacing your heating system, whether it's going from natural gas to electric or any type of switch, heat pumps or non-heat pumps.
Thank you, Steve. John, apologies. I missed the financing component to your question there.
No, but at this point, I think I've got the answer, and I think to a certain extent that there may be a gap that the ordinary homeowner may not really find a heat pump at this point affordable, but their current equipment may be failing, and I just, you know, I hope we address that.
I'd
John,
also
just
like to flag for everybody that some of these issues are currently under consideration by DEEP in the review of the CNLM plan, which is currently a proposed 3-year plan that's pending DEEP's review and approval. And we have received comments on this issue, but you know, I think even late comments would be welcome. And if anybody has them, feel free to submit them into our process.
Yeah, and I'll note as an indication of DEEP's interest in this area, 5 of the last 6 in the second set of requests for information sent to the utilities, 5 of the 6 were focused on heat pumps. So we expect that the engagement on heat pumps will evolve.
And John, just to let you know, on the low income side, the state's energy assistance program, also known as SEEP, has a home system repair and replace program, which provides support for replacement of boilers and heaters and water heaters. So that could aid in filling the gap. And I believe it's funded at $1 million. And also, just a plug, Operation Fuel is also, we just launched a pilot to assist folks with the replacement of a traditional system with a heat pump. So there are some nonprofit gaps that are filling, you know, nonprofit organizations and direct service organizations on the state side that are working to fill those gaps. But, you know, I think that you raised a really good point in wanting to ensure that no one is left behind. Are there any other questions or comments about the CNLM plan? Great. All right, we're going to move on to the equitable modern grid framework provided by PURA. Is that Josh Ryer?
It is. Thank you, Brenda. Is there a time I should aim to stop by? I just want to be mindful of your all's time.
Sure. We have you blocked for 30 minutes. But, you know, we do end at 3, so if, perhaps we can just maybe refrain from questions. We can ask those offline or in the chat, and you reply to them later if it goes over.
Awesome. Okay, that sounds great. Well, first off, thank you, Brenda, and thank you everyone for the invitation to present today. So for those that haven't met me or aren't familiar with the Equitable Modern Grid Initiative, my name is Josh Ryer. I'm the Director of Utility Programs at PURA. And so what that really means is under my office, we oversee all of the programs that are administered by the utilities, and then I also oversee our strategic initiatives, which includes the Equitable Modern Grid Initiative, as well as our performance-based regulation docket, which I'll mention a little bit at the end. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So where I want to start, and I see a lot of familiar names on the list today. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with kind of the 11 dockets that came out of this Equitable Modern Grid framework, or we kind of use framework and initiative interchangeably. So for those that have only been involved in a couple of dockets or not involved at all, what I want to go over first is kind of the foundation for what PURA was trying to achieve and where we started with the Equitable Modern Grid framework. So a little over 2 years ago, we released what's called an interim decision, but actually it kind of functionally looked a lot closer to kind of a white paper or a procedural order. And in that interim decision, we outlined this framework for really our approach to grid modernization. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And what we wanted to do, and starting with the foundation that actually Commissioner Dykes had started with in Grid Mod when she was chair at PURA, we wanted to build off of that kind of foundation of kind of the distribution system planning and grid modernization efforts that had gone on, and then kind of move that forward. And so what we really took a look at first was, and for those that are familiar and have looked at other states at grid modernization, this isn't a new concept, right? We talk about grid modernization a lot as an industry, and other states have done it in different ways across the country. So we didn't want to recreate the wheel, and we wanted to move things forward in a different and unique way. So what we first kind of stopped and thought about is, what's the new lens that we want to bring to this? What's the new perspective that we think is missing in most grid modernization efforts across the country? And it was really this lens of, and more than a lens, I'll talk about these 4 buckets in a second. It was really this focus on ensuring equitable outcomes and equitable program designs, and really not just talking about that and having an incentive adder and a solar program, which really is important. We authorized incentive adders in the recent the new solar program, or renewable energy programs rather, I should say. So that's obviously important, but from the very beginning, how do we do a better job of bringing equity into this process? And just the focus and making sure that our outcomes are providing more equitable overall. So there's kind of 4 buckets that we list here of ways that we went about trying to achieve that and infusing equity into kind of this new approach to grid mod. The first was to try and have a more inclusive process. For those that are familiar with PURA, or just PUCs, or utility commissions, I should say, across the country, we're quasi-judicial, so it's not always easy. We're not the most accessible just by our very nature. But we did want to start with trying to have a more inclusive process, and we did that in 2 ways. The first was to start, and a lot of you might remember, about 2 years ago, and actually the first grid mod kind of solutions day and public forum that we had was in our affordability docket. And we tried to make that as broad, as inclusive as possible, very much more like a legislative hearing, or a public comment session, than a traditional PURA, even technical meeting that's more informal. So we tried to open it up at the very beginning to be open to all solutions, all perspectives, and to really lower the barriers to entry from that perspective. The second way that we did that, and getting into organizational structure, is creating a new office, the Office of Education Outreach and Enforcement, that actually has a wall between us. So my office is what we call decisional staff, that runs a lot of these proceedings and writes the decisions up. There's a different office, the Office of Education Outreach and Enforcement, or EOE, as folks might know that it's known by, that really was set up to do a bunch of different things, but one in particular was to help folks that we call our non-traditional stakeholders to better understand the PURA process, and to give those stakeholders someone that they could go to not only understand the process, but to, on occasion, look for advice on, where does it make sense for us to engage. And then the last 2, I mentioned, I've said the term lens a couple of times. Again, for us, it was important to infuse the thinking about equitable outcomes and equity through all of the phases of the docket. So not our dockets, so not just through the outcomes, but actually in the process and in the questions that we're asking along the way. So it's a little bit of the journey is as important as the destination, in terms of bringing that substantive lens throughout the proceedings. And we also wanted to make sure, actually, this isn't even to Connecticut, bringing and talking about equity and inclusivity, as all of you know, I'm sure, is not a new concept per se. And we've actually seen it in a lot of public policy pieces over the last half decade or so. So making sure that we're taking our cues from the public policy that has been enacted and bringing that into our hearing room. Next slide, please. Great. So that's kind of the new lens that the new approach to grid modernization that we tried to infuse. And then we really set out with 4 main objectives and really leaning on that last one, public policy objectives, not only over the last half decade, but over the last decade, really since Public Act 1180, looking at what are the public policy objectives out there from not only legislation, but looking at deep comprehensive energy strategy, other piece, Executive Order 3, for example, from Governor Lamont. What are the key objectives that we're trying to achieve that need to be brought into this approach to equitably modernizing the electric distribution grid? And so we really landed on and outlined in the framework document that I talked about that came out in October of 2019, these 4 objectives. So the first is to not only meet our economy-wide decarbonization goals, but to do what we can in this sector to enable it. So lowering barriers to entry to get there, and also really furthering decarbonization where we can and where appropriate. To make sure we meet our economy-wide decarbonization goals, but also not only get there, but get there as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Really tied with that, I'm actually going to go backwards with these arrows, is the growth of the in-state green economy. So for those that are familiar with the storage program, the storage solutions program, energy storage solutions program, there we go, that I'll talk about in a little bit. Really, you'll see language in there about the sustained orderly development of the in-state storage industry. So ensuring that we're getting those economic benefits that go hand in foot with decarbonization to stay, not only come to the state, but stay in our state. I'm going to go back around, go into resilient, reliable, and secure commodity. And that really is I don't want to say an homage, but is a nod to traditional utility regulation, right? We think about, our mission at PURA historically has been to ensure safe, reliable, and adequate service at reasonable and affordable rates. So how do we do that? How do we provide, especially in the face of more extreme weather events, and increasing cybersecurity attacks, how do we provide a more resilient, reliable, and secure commodity? And the last one, all of these come with their own complexity, but debatably, affordability might be the most complex of all of these. But surely, I think, hopefully we can all agree that if done right and in concert, hopefully that all of these objectives, while in certain instances there might be push and pull between them, overall, hopefully the solutions that come out of trying to achieve the first 3 objectives can help provide opportunities for customers to enhance or at least take greater control over their own affordability. So next slide. So great, so that's the framework, the new perspective that we tried to bring, an approach to grid mod, and then the 4 key objectives that we're trying to bring to this. And so after laying that out, we then focused on identifying near-term topics that needed to be focused on to really ramp up our ability to meet those objectives. So we've opened these different dockets or investigations proceedings. Those are all terms that we kind of use interchangeably. I'll call them dockets here, just because that's the one we most commonly use. But so we identified 11 dockets that needed on 11 near-term target topics that we wanted to open up these investigations into, and we opened those in phases. So the first phase was looking at these 6 topics that you have in front of you. So energy affordability, advanced metering infrastructure, which is not only digital inverter interval data meters, there we go, but also the data and communications networks and billing systems associated with that metering. Electric storage, electric vehicles, and really it's zero emission vehicles, really charging infrastructure is kind of the hook there for PURA. Innovation pilots, and then interconnection standards. And I'll talk a little bit more about electric storage and zero emissions vehicles, as well as interconnection standards, because those are the three actually that we've, well, at least from Pura's perspective in our dockets, we've come to a conclusion on and authorized either new programs or new processes to address or rather to achieve the 4 objectives that I mentioned earlier. Next slide. So we opened those 6 2 years ago. Like I said, 3 of the 6 have concluded, with the rest having done lots of things, but that I'll go over quickly in a second. And then the next version or wave of dockets that we opened were these on the 4 that you have in front of you. So on non-wires alternatives. So for those that aren't familiar, that's looking at where potentially things like storage plus solar PV could maybe replace a traditional upgrade, substation upgrade, or poles and wires investment. RO5 has really evolved, and sorry, that's the Resilience, Reliability Standards and Programs docket, has evolved over the last year plus in light of Tropical Storm Isaias, and was really looking at not only reliability and resilience standards, but then the interconnection with emergency preparedness and planning. RO9, the third of the 4 here, on DER resources and analysis, we're in the middle of actually getting close to finishing that one up, and that was really to take a holistic view of all of the distributed energy resource programs that we have in the states. We actually authorized 2 new programs, one for residential, one for commercial and industrial customers. So a lot of the work that we were actually planning in that docket, we did in those dockets already. But like I said, we're still working on some of the analysis section to give people a better understanding of really, and better transparency into the data that we do have on the success and related metrics for the programs that we have in the state. And then RO9, this last one, new rate designs, is really has tackled a lot. The 2 things that I'll talk the most about that it's tackled was it authorized a new rate design for rate 30 customers, or mostly small businesses and Eversource's territory back in June. And then there's a coming phase to that docket where we'll look at low income discount rates that I believe our neighbors in Massachusetts have, as well as economic development rates, which other PSCs across the country have authorized as well. So we can go to the next slide. So just quickly, I mentioned some of these dockets already, but just because there was only 11 dockets that were explicitly a part of this Equitable Modern Grid initiative or framework, doesn't mean that the objectives that we have don't bleed into other dockets and investigations that Pura in my office oversee. I already mentioned the new renewable energy tariff programs and emergency planning and response. Those are 2 areas where we have we tried to bring the same perspective. And then also really tied together with the first docket on affordability is the state's arrearage forgiveness and financial assistance programs, as well as the COVID response docket. So bringing, it's kind of bringing lessons from our energy affordability docket in this proceeding or this initiative into those dockets, and then vice versa, bringing our learnings from the COVID response and the traditional arrearage forgiveness programs back into kind of this newer way of thinking about energy affordability. Next slide, please. Great. So I'm going to focus on, in terms of details, the things that we have concluded to date, just to have everyone kind of up to speed on what we've accomplished and the things that are coming. And then I'll quickly end with a teaser on performance-based regulation. So as President Garcia mentioned earlier, Pura has authorized the energy storage solutions programs. There we go. We have too many programs now with the term solutions in it, which is great. I'm glad that we have coordinated promotion across all of these programs. But so that the final decision in the grid mod docket that really authorized the framework was back in July, and it authorized a 9-year program starting this January for all residential and commercial industrial customers. And the program really leans on Public Act 2153. For those that aren't familiar, it's the Public Act that set in place a statewide target, a deployment target of 1,000 megawatts by the end of 2023 or by the start of 2021. In Section 2 of that Public Act, authorized PURA to establish this program. And so as part of our kind of piece of meeting 1,000 megawatts, and actually as is suggested by stakeholders, this program will aim to deploy 580 megawatts over the of storage over that 9-year period. There's two main mechanisms as part of the program. The first will be administered, so this program actually I should start with, will be jointly administered, I believe as President Garcia mentioned earlier, by the Green Bank and the electric utilities. And the upfront, so the two mechanisms that we have here are an upfront incentive that will be directly administered by the Connecticut Green Bank to help get over kind of the fixed upfront cost of these systems. And then the second part is a performance-based incentive that I would imagine most folks on this call are familiar with the Connected Solutions program. That's very similar to that. That's ensuring that we're getting some of the peak shaving benefits that these systems can offer. So you can see there kind of the caps on incentives in the Green Bank and the electric utilities have been putting together lots of resources on this program. So I won't get into too many of the details. I just encourage you to go to those websites if you're curious about the details. But I do want to touch on kind of the objectives of this program and what is unique. We're really focused on trying to maximize where we can customer resilience benefits, not only so that the benefits, resilience benefits to customers that either on average experience more outages or on average longer outages, as well as critical facilities, replacing fossil fuel gensets, and then also helping small businesses. And in line with kind of federal objectives and some other things I heard today, there's a target to deploy 40% in LMI communities with additional incentive adders, which does make me optimistic that we'll be able to hit that. And then I think a big thing here too that I'm excited about that I think makes this model potentially scalable to other jurisdictions is that we use the cost benefit, well actually I shouldn't say we, the Green Bank did a lot of work in our proceeding providing detailed cost benefit analysis, looking at kind of the 5 traditional cost benefit tests. And we really focused on the ratepayer impact measure as one, because again, for those that are familiar with kind of the thinking around a cost shift, if you have a rim above 1, there is no cost shift. So this program is actually designed around a rim of 1.4, which means that the program is actually providing benefits to those that are not participating. So I think that in terms of scalability that I was mentioning earlier, makes this something, obviously the specifics of what's included in the test and what the numbers say in different jurisdictions across the nation are going to be different. But if we can prove that out here, that makes it a lot easier to translate this program to really any jurisdiction across the country. Next slide. Great, so there's also a zero emissions or electric vehicle charging program that we authorized in July that will also be a 9-year program. And really the impetus for that and the focus on that program is to support Connecticut's EV deployment targets, specifically the ZEB MOU targets. And for those that are familiar with kind of the wedges analysis from the GC3, I think it was 2019 that it came out, that showed that 500,000 EVs need to be deployed by 2030. Is really the goal was to support the deployment of infrastructure that'll help us get there. Or more specifically, actually 50% in the interim to make sure we're ramping up appropriately. There's different managed charging or rate design components in the decision, as well as we're working on an additional low to moderate income mobility study, which will be really important in informing program design in future years. But the one thing I wanted to mention real quick about, there were two quick things before we move on. One is there will be an upfront incentive for residential customers that install level 2 chargers. So that's just something to look out for. And the second thing on both this program and the storage program that I wanted to mention, which frankly we stole from the efficiency world, is the concept of we have 3-year program cycles with annual program reviews that'll go through a PURA docket. So we're really looking forward to that, having that process to make sure we're delivering on the potential of these programs and making strategic adjustments where we need to. Next slide. Great, so I'm going to run through kind of a laundry list of other outcomes associated with the Equitable Modern Grid, and then if there's time, happy to take questions, or as Brenda suggested, to follow up offline. So I mentioned the forgiveness programs as well as the energy affordability docket earlier. One of the big things that we started with that energy affordability docket is we immediately had 100-day sprints, and then COVID happened. So I understand that convening and having 100-day sprints during that process was difficult, but luckily we were provided with some great report outs from those sprint processes, and a lot of those learnings were incorporated into the arrearage forgiveness programs that are actually in place currently. I'm sure a lot of you know that the winter moratorium period has started back in November 1st. So like I said, I think we've made a lot of important improvements in the program due to that first energy affordability docket. The AMI docket continues to move on. The electric utilities have provided updated proposals, and we received comments from stakeholders on how to potentially not pay for the infrastructure until we see customer benefits, I guess is the best layman, the best way I can say that in layman's terms. Next slide, please. So that's an update on the first docket and the second docket. I already talked about the third, which was storage, and the fourth one, which was the EV charging infrastructure. The fifth one is another one that I'm really excited about. It kind of takes this, the fifth, which is, we've deemed it the innovations pilot framework. Really, we've taken the concept from the fintech or financial technology industry of a regulatory sandbox and married it with, for those that are familiar with the Rev Connect program in New York that NYSERDA runs, and married those two together to kind of create a process that would allow for innovative technologies to be tested while also maintaining stakeholder and ratepayer protections, so that we're not paying for something that we don't ultimately see benefits for. But then most importantly, at least from my perspective, what the focus has been in designing that is on designing a framework that could scale these potential solutions to then help ratepayers at scale, for lack of a better term. I mentioned our sixth docket on interconnection standards is one of the three that we've reached a conclusion on. We stood up 2 technical and policy working groups between industry, PURA, other government agencies, and the electric utilities. And so we're seeing good discussions there. And really the emphasis is to learn from other jurisdictions so that we don't make the same mistakes that they have in terms of some of the barriers and interconnections that we've seen for distributed energy resources. Next slide. I might, just because I see we're getting close to time, I already mentioned the non-wires alternative docket. We've had, we issued a straw proposal with the link there for those that are interested, and already had a tech meeting. I mentioned the reliability and resilience program docket. We're actually having a tech, for those that are interested in learning about the improvements that the electric utilities have made to their emergency response plans since Tropical Storm Isaias. We're actually having a technical meeting next Tuesday on that. Next slide. We just opened this 10th docket that'll look at what we call the building blocks of resource adequacy, which will really look at the state's PPAs and how that could maybe be integrated with other processes. And then I'd already mentioned the new rate designs. We can go to the next slide. Great. And so the closing thought, or at least kind of in summary, what I wanted to say is, again, this was really Pura's way of trying to bring a new approach to grid modernization, to focus on those 4 objectives. And really the next phase is how do all of these kind of 11 pieces fit together comprehensively moving forward. In performance-based regulation, as well as integrated distribution system planning, but I'll leave that one to the side. Performance-based regulation really is one of those opportunities to align a lot of the objectives, the 4 that I talked about earlier, but the individual objectives of the 11 proceedings that we had in front of us into a more comprehensive way of regulating our utilities, which is, of course, is what Pura does. And so we're really excited about that process, which we envision being a multi-year, multifaceted stakeholder engagement process. So for folks that are interested in engaging, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we've tried to really hard to improve is the inclusivity of our processes. So certainly I'd encourage anyone that's interested to reach out, and we're happy to help you engage in that. I might have to push you to EOE, which is the group that I talked about earlier, but certainly we welcome your engagement. And with that, I just, again, really appreciate the time today.
Thank you so much, Josh. That was a really great update. And I applaud everyone at Pura for getting us through that 100-day sprint, despite the pandemic kind of just coming in right at the beginning of it. So we're going to now move on to plans for the 2022 legislative session. I believe that will be Brian and Vicki providing the update.
Yeah, this is Brian. Just a quick high-level overview, and Commissioner, if you wanted to elaborate on any executive order or any items, feel free. But this is the time of year where we talk about what we're doing looking ahead. The Green Bank has one priority, and one we're helping on policy proposals for the upcoming legislative session. The priority one is expanding CPACE to allow for resilience projects to be supported by the benefit assessment. Other states have the ability for their PACE policy to support resilience. You can imagine earthquakes in California, hurricanes in Florida. That is the priority one for the Connecticut Green Bank in light of the recent passage of expanding our authority to include environmental infrastructure, which includes resilience. So allowing the private sector to be able to use the PACE policy as a way of mobilizing private investment in our buildings to make them more resilient to the impacts of climate is a good thing. And then secondly is something that we're helping on, which is really tied to, I think, as the Director Ryer referred to REO4 around the ZEVs, the zero emission vehicles. They have just recently opened a docket to look at medium and heavy duty vehicles. We all want to see our school buses move from fossil fuels to electric school buses. So we're looking at a policy that would allow for municipalities to move beyond a 5-year contract for school buses to allow up to 10 years specifically for electric school buses. And as we all know, financing, over longer periods of time allows for the realization of technology deployment and the realization of energy saving. So there's something that we're just kind of looking at there. So those are two things that the Green Bank is working on. I don't know, Commissioner, if you wanted to say any more about the executive order or other things, or if the EDCs had anything they wanted to add. This is the part of the agenda where we talk about it.
Yes, I'd love to be able to say more about both the executive order and our legislative agenda. As far as our legislative agenda, we're still in the process of developing that with OPM, so it's just a little soon for me to be able to talk about that. I think some of the things that you'll see will be familiar. I think I can say that much from past years. As far as the executive order, it's at this point, I'll just say that it's quite broad and includes a lot of exciting work and goals. So, without saying too much more, I think there'll be a lot for everybody to sort of chew on, and I'm happy to talk about it more at our next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Fingers crossed on the home energy score, but that's just me. We're going to move on to other business, and I believe we have Steve Bruno on deck for that, along with Sergio Carrillo, Mackie Dykes, and Joel Kopelek.
Hello.
Yes, hey, good afternoon. This is Mackie.
Maggie, do you want to go first and I can add in anything?
I'll actually, if Sergio or someone else could do the residential single family, then I'm happy to go first on the rest of the
Okay.
chart.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sergio Carrillo with the Green Bank. So I wanted to provide a quick update on everything residential single family. And in the interest of time, and given that all the great details that Director Ryer provided around tariff and battery storage, I'll be very brief. So several things going on right now is the end of RCIP and the transition to the new renewable tariff that is being called Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program. The program is, I believe, ready to launch from the EDC's perspective. We have worked with them to help them develop some aspects of the program. And one of the things worth noting is that we helped ensure HES and HESIE remain part of the program and are mandatory. From a battery storage perspective, after 6 months of hard work and collaboration with the EDCs, the program is almost ready and will launch January 1st. We designed a program that meets PURA's objectives, including cost effectiveness. Director Ryer talked about the cost benefit analyses, and our program delivers a ratepayer impact measure, or RIM, of 1.4, meaning that the benefits of the program are 1.4 times greater than the costs of administering the program, and there will be no cost shifting to non-participating ratepayers. It ensures access to vulnerable communities, and the program targets 40% deployment in underserved and low-income communities. Our marketing plan will help us achieve those targets. And from a resiliency perspective, also we designed the program where all projects can provide resiliency by providing energy to homes and businesses during power outages. Again, in battery storage, it's worth noting that HES and HESIE are also part of the program and will be required for all projects requesting upfront incentives. We're currently working on the last few aspects of the program that required additional clarifications, and we'll be making a series of filings with PURA today and next week. So as I said, all pieces are coming together and the program will be available January 1st. And from a Smarty perspective, we're currently designing, trying to figure out how Smarty will be offered to residential customers interested in installing battery storage in their homes. I guess that's all I have on the residential single family. So I'll turn it over to Mackie.
Great, thanks, Sergio. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mackie Dykes with the Connecticut Green Bank. On the multifamily front, also very focused on the energy storage program there. That's sort of the greatest of the new area of focus there, in addition to the solar front, where legislation in the last session allowed the affordable multifamily market to access the new residential tariff, as well as provided for what is essentially on-site community solar, allowing the sharing of benefits amongst owner and tenants for solar for solar projects and affordable multifamily. So we're working with PURA, or working with stakeholders to engage with PURA on a proceeding to create the parameters of how that's going to work, and then tailor the Green Bank Solar PPA to hopefully deliver a lot of solar and even better, hopefully solar plus storage projects into that market. And then of course, continue collaboration with utilities on our core set of multifamily products, the Lime Loan and CPACE. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Nothing there, Mackie.
And then on the small business front, our I'd say very successful partnership between the Green Bank, Amalgamated Bank, and Eversource for the SBA program actually comes to an end in 6 days officially. This is the financing sort of platform that we put together. Over the last 3 years, it's provided over $72 million in funds for the financing aspect of SBEA. It's over 5,700 projects. We're working now to extend that. So we're going to do a short-term extension while we finalize the terms of what we hope will be another 3-year facility, which will expand some customer access to capital on the small business side. On the sort of medium to large business, we actually use that SBA platform to provide financing into the Eversource's new BEA program, and would expect sort of full integration of that partnership into the BEA program. And again, we continue to work on our other core financing product, CPACE. We've had a lot of collaboration on the CPACE new construction side with the new construction teams at the EDCs, working together on particular leads and projects to deliver, both the financing and the incentive package for new construction projects. CPACE is becoming a very popular tool on the new construction front. And then finally, on the institutional side, the SBA partnership, even though the name is small business, it's actually available to municipal and state customers. We expanded state availability up to 7 years and also increased their access to capital. In the extension, we're looking to provide even more access to capital for institutional customers. The Green Bank also has been running a program we call Solar MAP, the Solar Marketplace Assistance Program. We offer that to state and municipal customers, where we provide really kind of full project development services, and then get those projects out to the solar market for them to bid on and get projects done across the institutional sector. It's been very successful in the last couple of years, approaching 30 actually just over 30 megawatts of projects through the Solar Map program. Let me pause there, Steve, see if I missed anything.
No, that was perfect. I just wanted to, basically echo your thoughts on the success of the small business and municipal loan program. We're looking forward to expanding that for the next 3 years. And I think you mentioned the stats of the $70 million in loans. Pretty impressive that went through. And I think, had COVID not occurred, the numbers would have even been larger last year. So we're looking forward to keeping that growing and making some changes, the tweaks in the like they say, the 7 years and the $1 million to help stimulate continued investment, energy efficiency. So it's a great project. Thanks, Mackie.
Thank you both. Are there any questions or comments for Steve, Mackie, or Mackie?
This is John Harity. I just wanted to say briefly, I was so glad to hear Mackie say that CPACE is become a popular program, because I have wondered for years why it was not, and I'm happy that it is now. Thank you.
I'll say relative. I still think you're right, John, that on the retrofit side, it should be more popular than it is. Fairly stagnant there. It's really new construction where we're just seeing a ton of interest, especially on the lending side, because lenders, they're looking for the greatest capital deployment opportunity, and new construction represents that. So a lot of the lending markets focused on that. We're seeing tens of millions of dollars in the sort of third part in the private CPACE lender pipeline So yeah, ton of interest there. It's great. You know, we're getting public policy benefits for it, so I'm excited to see that. But I'm still with you that we need to crack the secret on the retrofit market still.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving right along here, we're a few minutes over, so if there are no other questions or comments for any of our presenters this afternoon, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'd make that motion. John Harity.
Lonnie, I would second it.
Any nays? Abstentions? Great, motion carries. This meeting is officially adjourned, and thank you all for your patience with my first meeting as chair, and I'm looking forward to what the future holds for this committee.
Thanks, everybody.